Hello, and welcome to another episode of Surroundscapes. This is another one of our Hot Topics episodes, and I'm delighted to welcome back someone who was on our last series, Series 5, talking about experiential design. It's my friend, again from Portland, Oregon, Scott Simpson from AVI-SPL XTG, and this time he's here to talk about something he knows a tremendous amount about: sustainability in AV design. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks so much, Graham.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you back. I'm just going to let you go on this one. So talk to us a little bit, well, talk to us a lot, actually, about sustainability in AV design, because I know you come at it from quite a different angle to some of the things that most people think about.
Yeah, so this is something I'm very passionate about, and goes back to my days when I was a control system programmer. I started off as an AMX programmer, and after that, Crestron, and we started doing a lot of integrations with lighting, with some integrations with building management systems, and I started really seeing what the possibilities were. This was early 2000s that I really started getting into this, and so I started thinking about the possibilities of systems automation and things like daylight harvesting and ways that we can reduce carbon in buildings. So if you think about it, buildings are responsible for 40% of the carbon emitted into the atmosphere. So we have a lot of opportunity to improve that. And there's been a lot of strides that have happened over the years, but nothing has excited me quite as much as what I've seen in the last year with machine learning, with AI. And I think the possibilities are really gonna just surprise everyone. I was looking back, I did a presentation recently for the Society of Experiential Graphic Design, and I looked back before that because I wanted to see where the trends are going with some of our systems that we're designing. And I looked back in the video servers for a project I did for Boeing in 2015 is when when we actually installed. It was over 25,000 watts for the video servers in that project. Then I think back to this year, I don't know, you remember at ISE, Hive introduced a 8K video server that can actually just fit into the slot of a projector or just a small amount of wattage compared to what we've had to do in the past. So I'm looking at those trends and seeing, wow, we're really going to make a difference. Most of the time in AV, when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about supply chains or our vendors, like yourself, and what they're doing with packaging or what they're doing with, utilizing recycled material. But we really have an opportunity as AV designers, as AV engineers, as AV installers to make a difference in our AV designs as well. So I think I like to think of ways outside of the box that we can, both through integration with other disciplines, but also through out of the box thinking when it comes to design. One of my favorite things, years ago, Graham, when we went to the living building that we worked on here in Portland. And for those of you who don't know, a living building it's the toughest green building certification you can achieve. So a living building has to be 105% efficient. It has to produce more electricity than it uses. So we're talking very, very stringent electrical budgets. So a lot of power management routines that have to be implemented. But one of the things that I thought was really, really cool is the out-of-box thinking that our mechanical engineers came up with. So we were figuring out ways that we can reduce the BTUs and the power required for our racks and our IDFs. So the equipment racks, we ended up actually putting them right across from heat pump hot water heaters. And so what that did is, just by putting those and putting a open fence instead of a door and wall, we actually created a symbiotic relationship where the heat from the racks were actually feeding the heat pumps, and then the fans from the heat pumps were blowing cool air onto the racks, therefore making a very efficient loop where we really did not need much cooling in there. We didn't need all of that power. And just thinking outside of the box, thinking as an ecosystem rather than just, one silo within the building. So that's been something that I've really been advocating for lately, is breaking down silos. And you and I have talked about this quite a bit, where it's going to really become essential as we start seeing advances like media context protocol, MCP, where we're going to be able to integrate with LLMs and really be able to automate those efficiencies, find ways to add context to the way we're using the buildings, and be able to take power management to a whole new level, and predictive automation, things like that. So we have to start thinking outside of just our own small little system, our own little ecosystem, and be a part of the greater whole of the building systems.
I'm going to go back to something you said very early and ask you to explain it. You mentioned the phrase daylight harvesting. Can you explain more about what that is?
Well, daylight harvesting, think of, so years ago, we used to integrate with Lutron lighting, and Lutron has shading systems. And so daylight harvesting, say for instance, in the wintertime, where you wanted to reduce how much heating you have, you can actually lift the shades automatically and use the power of the sun to actually help heat up that room. So daylight harvesting is a way to improve the efficiency of the heating systems or cooling systems, if you want to, by using automatic shading. So we used to, there's systems set up to where that can integrate with BMS, can integrate with, all of the systems, thermostats, to understand, ways that we can improve the efficiencies of those, of the efficiencies of the HVAC system, things like that,
Interesting. And you talked about smart buildings and, the building that you used to work in Portland, which is an amazing building. And I wonder about the role of AV equipment as it becomes more and more integrated into smart buildings. How do you see that kind of moving forward? Do you think that AV will be thought about earlier in a design and will become part of the fabric of the building rather than something added on at the end in the tenant improvements as people move in?
I think so, because if you think of what we're looking at doing is we're trying to make the building reactive to the way people use it, and also reactive to the to the efficiency goals that they're trying to achieve. So to do that, we need data on how people are using it, and AV is where people are using buildings. We're the eyes and ears of the building. And so when you look at things like we discussed with MCP, it's the central part of that integration is going to be our microphones, our cameras, the things that we're putting into our conference rooms and our and other spaces to where we interface with the building technology. And so we're going to be essential. AV is essential to that, to making that happen. And previously, on other smart building initiatives, at least in North America, AV's not been a part of that conversation, which I think's very myopic. If you look at what's happening in Europe, AV integrators for a long time have morphed into becoming master systems integrators for smart building projects. Because, if you look at the background of control systems, for years, Crestron and AMX have been integrating with every other subsystem, and from HVAC to lighting to sprinklers to irrigation to things like that. So it just makes sense that we're part of the conversation, and that's happened worldwide. Just for some reason, North America has been just very HVAC focused, in
Mhm.
smart buildings. But I think it's essential that that we become a part of the conversation early on, because we are going to be essential to getting that data you need to how people are using the building.
Mhm. That's a great phrase. I'm going to remember that. We're the eyes and ears of the building. That's very true. Um, on the audio side, we think a lot about kind of power consumption of amplifiers and that sort of thing, and energy save mode. But I know on the video side, you think about some things I hadn't really even thought about, which is like the content and the color ways in the content. Can you say more about that? Because I found that fascinating when you raised that with me in one of our bar conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was kind of interesting because when we were working a few years ago, I was working on the PDX Airport project. And for those of you who haven't seen it, PDX Airport, above each security queue, there are these really, really large 128-foot by 23-foot tall direct view LED walls from planar. And the purpose of these walls are to have a calming effect to help people relax as they're going through a very stressful time, TSA security checks. So what we came up with to help. So those of you who have looked at it and installed direct view LED over the years, you know how power hungry they can be. How many kilowatts of power really large direct view LED walls can consume. And so, and that becomes a problem. Like, for instance, at the PAE Living Building, we couldn't use LED at all because it was just, there's not possible to fit in within the power budget. So we ended up using older technology, LCD, but a much more energy efficient version, Energy Star rated LCD video wall. But at PDX Airport, there's, that just wasn't feasible. To get that size with that canvas, you need LED. So they were looking at ways to reduce the power consumption from those LED walls during peak demand hours. Now, what that means is peak demand hours are the hours when energy use is going up a lot, but renewables have not been kicked in. Say, for instance, if you look at when solar kicks in, say, for instance, in the wintertime, it's not until late morning in the Northwest. But then all these power up routines are happening much earlier than that. And that's peak demand charges will cause a spike in your power bill because of that. So that's a lot of money. And then also it's a lot of stress on the grid. So power companies will reward you for staying out of that peak demand and staying within the time frame of the renewables. So what we did to help lessen the impact during those peak demand hours is we were thinking, okay, direct view LED uses a lot of power, but that power consumption depends on the color it's showing. Mm-hmm. So it fluctuates a lot depending on that color value. So I've actually got the chart right here. Black can be around 10 to 13%, gray 42%. Then you get up to green, a little under 55%, but then you go up to magenta, 72, yellow, 85%. Big fluctuations. And what I mean by that percentage is that's the percentage of max power it's using. Mm-hmm. So if we can govern the content management system to only show content that is displaying lower impact colors, then we found that we could reduce the energy bill by around $40,000 per year per video wall just by governing the content that it showed. So I went to Planar and actually put together, a report on those values, and I actually have a white paper that I should release at some point. But yeah, we can actually look at the content that we're developing for that and reduce that impact. So the way that the everyday person can have an impact there is when you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and it's going to be in front of a huge direct view LED wall, you can actually just not use a lot of white backgrounds. and use black backgrounds, and that will make a huge impact on how much power you're consuming. So, and then another way that content can really have an impact on power consumption is, and the way we design systems, is through utilizing some of the new AI tools that NVIDIA has released with their recent GPUs. So NVIDIA has an amazing AI upscaling capability in their new GPUs. And what this allows us to do is, say, for instance, you want a high resolution, let's say 4K, 3840 by 2160. 4K image. Well, that 4K image, traditionally, that's been throughout the entire workflow, it stayed 4K, which means that you really had to have a beefed up video server. Well, now we can downscale that to 1080p, 1920 by 1080, and then reduce the amount of power and CPU that we need in our render machine, get a much smaller PC, and then just upscale right at the output with the GPU. And we found with a lot of the content, we couldn't tell no difference at all. And so that's really has a huge impact on the, for cost, the amount of money it takes for a massive PC or video server, and then also the power consumption you need to drive these things. So we're seeing a lot of great trends happening. Despite, I know AI is synonymous these days with, nuclear power, power hungry, stress on the grid. But we do see a lot of trends within AI that are actually going to take things the opposite direction.
Yeah, there's you're thinking about that quite apart from me thinking about using black backgrounds in PowerPoint presentations. Something I hadn't even thought about was with those huge screens in PDX and similar screens elsewhere, how much impact does the heat from those screens using the bright colors have on the environment of the actual airport itself?
Well, there was a lot of consideration. We actually, for that project, we actually set up a mock-up in an old airplane hangar and actually did thermal imaging to figure that out. So through that, in the design, we actually showed that there was some quite a bit of there was kind of a chimney effect behind the video wall that was, pretty much taking care of the heat behind it. And in front of it, the only thing we had to concern ourselves were people walking in front of it. So we had to do a lot of, so there are considerable concerns for cooling. So we looked at, with our mechanical engineers, looked at what it would take to make sure that, no one was sweating as they're walking across that thing in the summertime. But, and we found that one of the things that really, we found that really wasn't a problem because of another breakthrough that occurred previously. If you showed something yellow, it would be hot to the touch. But now there's a new architecture called common cathode rather than common anode, which keeps the heat dissipation half of what it was before. So if you make sure that if you're looking for direct view LED, look for common cathode, or ask the manufacturer, are you common cathode or common anode? And essentially that common cathode can reduce power consumption by 40% over common anode. And also it will really reduce the amount of heat that's burning off of that. And so with planar, we used common cathode in their carbon light series, and that really reduced the amount of heat coming off the front of it. We had a chimney effect with the mounting system behind it and the gap behind it, so it created airflow behind that. And so we really didn't have any issues there.
Yeah, I was more wondering if the airport actually used that heat as part of its heating system, whether that was significant enough that it made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, hey, put some put some heat pumps near it, and there you go.
Yeah, I've got a friend in Italy who designed an incredibly energy efficient house, and I was talking to him about his kitchen because he's got an island with a hob on it, and we were looking at doing a similar thing here, and I didn't want an overhead fume extractor because of aesthetic reasons, and he doesn't have one. He has like a one at the back of the hob, and I said to him, does that work well? And he said, yeah, it works really well, but we had this issue whereby this house, I believe, won the most energy efficient house in Europe in the year it was built about 5 years ago. And the problem they had was the fans, the extraction fans, were so powerful that it was creating a vacuum in the house. So because the house was so well sealed, and so they had to link it with the HVAC system to as the fans are engaged, to pump more air into the house to avoid this vacuum effect. And you were talking about AI earlier and the interconnectivity of different systems in the built environment, and I think that's something that we're going to be hearing a lot more about in future. The impact of the different technologies within a building, and it'll be interesting to see how people use, like you were talking about in the PA building here in Portland, where you were using the heat of the racks to interact with the heat pumps. Yeah, I think those are going to be interesting discussions to be had.
I think, yeah, and I think integration is going to be. I've seen more. I haven't seen this much energy behind moving us in this direction. And this has been a really, really slow burn. I mean, how long have we been hearing about smart buildings, right?
Yeah, decades. Yeah.
I actually have a talk titled "We Were Promised Jetpacks in Smart Buildings," because for years we've been hearing about both of those. Jetpacks in the future will all be in jetpacks. When I was a kid in the 70s, I thought I'd be getting to work at this time in a jetpack. But also, I've been hearing about smart buildings forever. But every time I've actually worked on a smart building project, it is such a roadblock after roadblock after roadblock to get this level of integration. But we're actually seeing a lot of movement happening. Particularly, I think the AV world really needs to look at a couple things. One is the recent acquisition by QSC's acquisition by Acuity. I think that's going to, if you look at the part of Acuity's business that they, that QSC is now a part of, it's their building management part of their business. So DizTech, which is their building management system, DizTech has been used by Google for years as part of their digital buildings initiative, and because it plays well with others, it supports common protocols that play well with others, like MQTT, and it integrates well with other disciplines. So now, as soon as QSC got acquired, I looked in my QSC designer, and there's a new plugin for DizTech right there, building management plugin. So already things are moving quickly. And also Google's recently, Acuity also hired Google's head of digital buildings, Sabine Lamb, who for years worked on developing their stack for their digital buildings initiative. So AV is becoming a part of this rapidly. And so I think that's because they're starting to realize, wait a second, we need that data, we need that human input, and we need to be where people are interfacing with the building.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that acquisition because my thoughts were very similar, and it was good to see QSC be acquired by a smart building company rather than a private equity. My experiences at Biamp of PE, being in the PE world, weren't great, and that's the only option for a lot of companies. And QSC found a good way out, hopefully. I want to come back to the talk on large-scale video and LED walls. And in the audio domain, we at the Lenbrook Media Group are doing a lot of work around adaptive codecs. So codecs that change bandwidth on the fly. So as the audio content, well, there's a number of things. As the bandwidth scales up and down, the compression changes, but also as different forms of audio content come through, so the bandwidth changes. Is that a thing in the video world as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that you're starting to see, handling streams and handling buffering and bandwidth has always been something, but I think that being able to add context to what those fluctuations, where those fluctuations are coming from, are going to be essential. And I think that it kind of, I don't know, it makes me think of similarly what I was trying to achieve a few years back with a common problem with integration, for instance, is data normalization. We got all this data, but what does it mean? What is it? How do we make sense of all of this data? Because we have the data coming from different sources, and not everybody's agreeing what to call these things. For instance, in the smart building world, you have a building management system, but you're trying to figure out, okay, this data is coming from a DSP. How do we all agree what this thing's called? So in the world of smart buildings, it's called ontology tagging, so that you know what this device is, you know where it belongs in the ecosystem. And sorry, I'm veering off, but it kind of ties into what you were saying, because I think you can use machine learning to understand what is causing those hiccups within the stream. I think you can identify what this is and where it's coming from based upon teaching an AI what this is in the real world. So what am I talking about? For example, I think that in the future we can automate the process of data normalization in a smart building by saying, okay, this is how a air handler looks audibly or electrically. We can look at the electrical system and say, okay, here's the electrical signature of a air handler. And we can actually see that. If you look at, you can actually look at graphs of, okay, this is what the electrical signature looks like of a air handler. Well, we can teach that to an AI, and it can then in the future identify, oh, I know that's an air handler. We'll all agree that it's called this. I think you can do that with data streams. I think we can find a way to do that with data streams, going, okay, just teaching the patterns and anomalies where we know, okay, this noise is definitely coming from this, or this noise is coming from that. So I think that we can use machine learning to identify things that are below, what we see, and more electrical anomalies, bandwidth anomalies, and dither, things like that.
That's kind of, as you were talking about it, my mind was going to stem separation in the audio world, where we're looking at music and being able to separate out different stems, and this is a complete kind of tangent, but how I feel that might be something of a key to how musicians can make money in the digital domain. But what you seem to be talking about is almost that same thing in the electrical signature. So being able to pull apart electrical data streams and say, okay, well, that's coming from here and that's coming from here. What do you then do once you've identified, say, the electrical signature of an air handler? What do you do with that data?
Well, what you can do, one of my favorite startups that are in the building management space is a startup called Community Energy Labs here in Portland. And Tanya Barham is the CEO, and she's one of the most brilliant people I've ever listened to. So anytime she talks, I love to tune in and listen to her. And she what she's doing, and we had conversations before ChatGPT came out. She started, she was using AI to improve power management routines in schools. Now, she said, I'm just starting off with schools. The reason why is because she wanted very disciplined data sets that she could build off of, rather than just shooting for the stars. She said most building management systems that are using AI, they want to go for Google and Microsoft right off the bat, and with huge data sets, and that takes a long, long time. And I think it's analogous to what's happening with self-driving cars. So you have the one approach where Tesla said, okay, we've got it, we can do it everywhere, and look how long that's taken. But then you look at Waymo, and Waymo said, we're just going to start off with San Francisco and just learn San Francisco. And so it was slow, steady, and just had that data set. You know, if you're in the East Bay, I'm sorry, we're just in San Francisco right now. And learn that and get good at that. And so that's what Community Energy Labs has done with building management systems. So what I was talking about before with peak demand, what was happening is schools would put in solar arrays, and then they would say, wait a second, why is my bill not going down? Why am I still paying the same amount for power, even though we put in solar arrays? Well, it's those peak demand charges. And everything would come up early in the morning, and then the price was set based upon those peak demand charges, and they continued. So she figured out a way to use AI to figure out the best possible way to stagger the startup routine. Each of those devices. And she's saving between 30 and 60% power reductions in each school. And she said return on investment is around 2 months.
Oh, wow.
So she's saving them that much money. And I asked her, I said, so your data sets are huge, right? She's like, no, I'm using small data sets. And she told me one of the funniest things that I've actually brought this up to other people that work in AI, and they totally agree. And this is something that I've heard elsewhere, is that AI is like a toddler. And so you have to be how many people have had toddlers that say something inappropriate in the grocery store loudly? You have to be deliberate and careful of what you're feeding a toddler. So AI is like a toddler. And so she was very disciplined in her data sets, which led her to success. And she's now moved from the West Coast. She's now started moving to New York, and she's now she's now starting to move slowly outside of schools and move into other buildings. But she's had more success than almost anybody I've seen. And it's because she started with small discipline data sets that she knew were accurate. And that's where you're seeing a lot of success in building management, I think.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I imagine a school is a really great place to start because it's so regimented. The day is so regimented, classes, lunch, kind of that kind of thing. You can really, you've got a lot of help as opposed to an environment, say like a workplace where it's much more dynamic on a day-to-day basis. So kind of that makes sense. I love that idea of starting small, gaining mastery in one segment and expanding out from that rather than trying to, do a bit of everything. And you answered the question as to what you do once you've separated those stems, which is then, stagger the demand by being able to see what's happening and pull it apart and then make changes.
Absolutely. And things like predictive maintenance. You can, or you can actually take automation to the next level. And so not only can you stagger those, you can also get data on, okay, hey, I know this is the, think back to what we were talking about just a second ago with power signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know this is the power signature of a healthy system.
Yeah.
Now we start seeing anomalies.
Hmm.
We know something's not right from a number of different data points, not just, you know, we can look at the electrical signature and notice that, oh, that's changed.
Yep.
So you can start to find anomalies as well.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Going back to the display world, jumping about all over the place here.
Sorry.
No, that's the way it goes. We began to see at ISE e-ink displays. How do you think that's going to play out, particularly in digital signage, I imagine?
It's huge. So it's funny because I'm starting to feel a lot of criticism because e-ink still doesn't perform as well with moving images, but always countered by saying, how much digital signage do you see out there that is just showing a static image? I mean, think about it. Most of the displays you see, whether it's menus or, you know, digital wayfinding or just digital displays, you know, moving between announcements at a hotel, you know, or schedules. Those are all static images that e-ink is perfect for.
Yeah.
And the, you know, the new Philips displays, if it's static image, it's using no power at all. If we could replace all of the video displays, all the digital signage displays that are showing static images with e-ink, the impact would be enormous.
Yeah, I think they were called Agile Display from memory. At ISE, there was this company that had an e-ink display with a solar panel on the top of the bezel, literally, and it received its content either once or twice a day, depending on the light level, wirelessly, and it was literally a completely wireless thing that you could just literally mount on the wall. There was no power needed. There was no content needed, as well as its power implications. It also made deployment at scale really easy. And in a number of things, as you know, I've been doing some very large deployments in the retail and hospitality world, and I see echoes of that in the corporate world with people doing kind of huddle rooms and all sorts of things, and just this ability to deploy at scale. And how do you do it? And things like that, where you literally you've just got to put your mounting hardware on the wall, and you put your display on the wall, and you're done. You walk away. Our PoE speakers are not quite as easy because you have one cable, but it's the sort of thing. And that's kind of fascinating to me, because a lot of end customers, when you talk to them, we think in our industry about all the cool tech we have, but they're much more focused on how can I deploy it quickly, reproducibly, and reliably. And these sorts of things help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And think about the embedded carbon within all of that infrastructure that in the past that you had to put in.
Yep. And the other thing, going back to the smart building play and the building AV more into the fabric of the building, I noticed that trend within property development, where property developers are wanting to add more value to the core of the building so they can charge more for space, and B, so that they can make it a lot easier and quicker for tenants to come in and spin up quickly. The tenant improvement phase is a lot quicker, so people can come into shells of buildings, and a lot more of the basic systems are already there. So again, with this kind of scaling up, and obviously with the effect of the pandemic and the effect on certainly the workplace, where I believe the figures I was looking at were that in North America, there's 17 million square feet of office space deployed this year versus a 10-year average of 44 million. So there's that decline with where we're all working out what a hybrid workspace looks like, and how much space large enterprises actually need. However, something like healthcare is ramping up, 49 million square feet, and ramping up. So as people are deploying into these areas, these sorts of questions become super important.
Absolutely. And so not only that, retrofitting and the cost of retrofitting and the infrastructure, any ways we can reduce that and make it more seamless to utilize this space in new ways. I mean, I just think that we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, I think hybrid work is not going to go away. Mm-hmm. And, but I think we have to reinvent these spaces that we have, mm-hmm. much in the way Europe has done from millennium. It's Europe has always had to reinvent spaces.
Yeah.
And, it's just in North America, we always think of spaces as, okay, it's this purpose, and unless it's a dive bar and an old Pizza Hut, it seems like spaces are just torn down and reproduced. And so unlike Europe, I think we need to think more like Europe and start realizing that we can give these spaces a third, fourth, and fifth life, mm-hmm. but we just need to make sure that we have, some great strategies and utilizing some new advances in technology to, make it more seamless for that to happen.
Yeah, you've reminded me of a great book by Stuart Brand, the founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, which is called How Buildings Learn. And it's about the kind of, as you say, the life of buildings and the iterations that they go through. And when you talk about retrofitting, cost is one thing, but time is the other thing. So that, we did an installation last year where they were retrofitting into 85 stores a day, and just the downtime, getting how long that store is out of commission because the audio system's being retrofitted, or the video systems, digital signage is being retrofitted, or whatever technology you're retrofitting, is a huge operational has huge operational implications.
Absolutely.
Another trend at the moment is the trend of the we've moved to some extent from the energy efficient building to the well building, and so you've got the well movement, and again we're involved in that with a company that we've just announced a deeper partnership with, Moodsonic, again from Europe, doing biophilic soundscaping, and that's only one part of a well building, along with with lighting that tracks circadian rhythms, with HVAC mm-hmm. that tracks outside temperature, with video displays, with green walls, with all sorts of other things. How do you see those two initiatives knitting together, energy efficiency and the well office movement?
No, I think well, one thing, the well office movement plays into providing a comfortable space that your employees will want to travel to. Mm-hmm. That in the past, I think of all of the times in the past that I've worked under bad fluorescent lighting and very sterile looking spaces, and I think that over time that really wears on you. Like, we actually have done a few workplace of the future initiatives with some companies that we're trying to rethink, trying to think of ways how to get people back in the office. Mm-hmm. And I've been looking a lot at, and we've talked a bit about this in the past, all the really amazing things that Oregon State University have done with their lecture halls. And one of the things that they did, which is really interesting, is that they made it so that each lecture hall is aesthetically different. Mm-hmm. So they found that throughout the day, people do not like monotony and do not like the same cookie cutter conference room to conference room to conference room So getting out of the thought of, okay, this is conference room, huddle room, this is conference room small, this is conference room medium, but they look exactly the same. And it really wears on you. And also your retention improves when you put it into a particular distinctive space.
Mm-hmm.
So they found that learning improved as they started breaking up aesthetically, and people could recall, oh yeah, I relearned that here, and I remember that. It was much easier to put those together if they were distinctively different spaces. So I think that people's well-being, their productivity improves. But and as you were saying, I think biophilia plays really big into that, because we have evolved over so much time, and now we're the massive changes that are happening. Our bodies have not evolved to keep up with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we desperately need those little biophilic tiebacks to feel comfortable, And I think the biophilic soundscapes are something I've been really, really excited about. And I'm really, and in fact, I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about that for people who are not aware of the biophilic soundscapes. If you could talk a little bit more about what's going on in that space, because I'm really fascinated by it.
Sure. I think, there was something, I look out for these catchphrases, and the one you mentioned earlier, "We're the eyes and ears of the building," is a great one. It's going to stick in my memory. Another one that Bernd Schindler, a German consultant friend of mine, said years ago now is the workplace is the new hospitality, and this is this concept of people needing to entice workers back into the workplace, and I think that's really, really, really important, because remote work, I think, is great for productivity but terrible for creativity, and it's really important that companies bring people back together face to face, at least for some of the time, so that they can rekindle that creativity. I think we're seeing that in the pace of innovation, and real innovation, really different things, particularly post-pandemic.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a load of reasons I want to see people back together face to face. I mean, the polarization can be alleviated if you're actually talking to people face to face. There's a whole load of reasons. The biophilic soundscaping is it's grown out of the move to open office environment, and people being in open offices and feeling a lack of privacy and productivity, being distracted by other people. So back in the day, being, I don't know, 20 years ago, I suppose, people began to put in sound masking systems, and those were used frequency shaped pink noise to put a steady state tone over ambient. And so you'll go in, you'll measure the ambient in a space by frequency as well as by amplitude, and you will frequency shape pink noise, and then you'll lift the level up to be just above ambient. And what that then does is you psychoacoustically take that out, in the same way as when you get into a plane, you take out the noise of the jet engines. Or if you're in a room with a projector or HVAC system, you don't notice it after a while. The problem is, even though you don't notice it, your brain is processing it all day. So that's one of the reasons you get out of a plane really tired, because your brain has been processing this, taking the jet engine noise out of your conscious. And so the same thing happens with noise masking systems, sound masking systems. People hate them. They make them tired. They give them headaches. So I go into a lot of offices where they're turned off again. And what biophilic soundscaping, and especially Mood Sonic, that really are the leaders in this field, are doing, is similar to when you, for example, go to a park to have a picnic with your family. So,
Okay.
you're going into the park, you've got your little picnic blanket, your picnic, you're chatting away. There's a family over here, there's a family over here, and you can hear them, but they don't disturb you because you're not hearing individual words. You're hearing a kind of babble of noise. And the reason for that is that the natural sounds, the sounds of the wind, the sounds of maybe water, the birds, are blurring that sound. So they're not cutting it out, they're not masking it, they're just blurring it.
Okay.
And this is the principle of biophilic, one of the principles of biophilic soundscaping, that you can use sounds of nature to blur the sounds of the people around you to the extent that you can still hear they're there, but they don't disturb you. And rather than it being destructive, tiring, annoying, we over millennia have become accustomed to loving the sound of nature. Julian Treasure, my friend, talks a lot about you need to worry when nature is silent. When the birds stop, there's something coming. There's danger. We're attuned to being around nature, so it's actively makes us happy. And
So
then
essentially, silence could be the birds flew away because a predator is on its way.
Yeah. There's danger. There's likely danger from something. It's an unnatural state. So that's some of the basis of it. But then you move on, and you can, by making these soundscapes, you can then bring design soundscapes with specific outcomes. So you can design a soundscape for focus, or you can design a soundscape for relaxation, or you can design a soundscape for reassurance or energy. And that goes around this concept of activity-based work, where an office is not a place you go to your desk, same desk every day, all day, get there, sit down, work for the day, go to some meetings, but come back, go home. But you kind of are an itinerant around the office, depending on what you want to do. So if you've got a report you want to bang out, you go to the focus zone, and the lighting's designed for focus, the HVAC temperature is right for focus, the furniture's right for focus, the soundscape's right for focus. You can go there, you can concentrate, you can get your report done. And then maybe for me, after lunch, when I'm feeling kind of energy's low, I might go to the energy area because I'm feeling sleepy and I need to have a bit of a G up so I can still be productive. But late in the day, maybe, well, I wish this most days, but maybe I've finished everything I need to do. I just want to kick back and read some trade journals or something. Maybe I go to the relaxation zone to do that. So we're building what Steelcase would call neighborhoods. And my contention is that a lot of the most interesting work in the workspace is happening outside the meeting rooms. We as an AV industry are hyper focused on the meeting rooms. And what a lot of the most interesting work's done outside the meeting rooms, in the actual workspace itself, but also in the spaces that you design in XTG with the executive briefing centers and the lobbies and experience centers. So I think our industry's focused way over here, where the interesting stuff's happening over here, and soundscaping is a part of that experiential design.
No, I like that kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier, because where we've been doing a lot of advising to companies on making rooms more purposeful, including meeting rooms. So what you were saying about having the focus room to where you can really concentrate. I've also said previously that think about your teams. The meeting room that your HR team is not necessarily the meeting room that your design team needs, and it's not necessarily the meeting room that your finance team needs. And so making more purposeful rooms that fit to the one, creatives over here and more analytical folks over here, they're very different, and their meetings are very different. And think of those spaces and the perfect spaces for your different teams, and how they would use those spaces. and then think of all of the other elements, like you were saying, from sight, sound, all of the senses, and how to elevate those experiences.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things there. It's not just different departments need different meeting rooms, but the same department might need different meeting rooms for different types of meetings. So, you know, a brainstorming meeting for a design department might look different to an implementation meeting for that same department. So you can book different meeting rooms for the same department, depending on the outcome you want from that meeting. But I'm also not just talking about rooms, I'm talking about spaces within open offices. So, and this is this concept of activity-based working. So you're actually creating zones within open spaces. So you're going over to an energy zone or a focus zone. It's not walled off. It's just in an open space.
No, and that's a good point, because even spaces are becoming more and more multi-purpose.
Mm-hmm.
More and more, we're asked to come up with spaces that have 4 or 5 different use cases, and a lot of times they'll be within an open office space. But you're right. Ways to make those spaces dynamic but different, and be, you know, even within that same open space, but be more distinctive and more specialized for what you're trying to accomplish. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's another element that actually I hadn't really thought about, but I want to bring it up now, which is the way that we make stuff and the way that most lighting companies make stuff now, where the intelligence is distributed to the endpoints, means that you can move those spaces around a lot. So you don't have a fixed space. So let's say you allocate your 25% of your open office space to focus, but you actually find that space is oversubscribed. You can really easily just move that out to be 35%, or and you can just do it dynamically. You can even do it during the day with a lot of these systems by rezoning dynamically. You can do that in lighting zones, you can do that in audio zones, HVAC zones. And so as demand for different areas changes, you can move those areas around. And I think this move towards more intelligent endpoints, you know, you talk about us being the eyes and ears, which we truly are, but that then means those endpoints are more monitorable. You can see how those endpoints are being used. You can, you know, turn them off and on as needed. And I think this move from a very centralized architecture historically to a much more decentralized architecture allows for a lot of this, you know, what we've been talking about: energy management, flexible workspaces, spaces in general.
No, it's really interesting, because to tie it back to sustainability, absolutely. You know, if we're not centralizing everything with with everything possible to serve every space out, but only utilizing those things we need as we need them.
Yeah.
Within those spaces, and would really reduce that impact, but also making those spaces more dynamic. And also, there's a lot of strategies we're using now for, you know, getting that data. And a lot of times you have these legacy LANs, these legacy networks that are, you know, that the client does not want to converge in any way. So nowadays we have ways through LTE and 5G to get that straight to their data lake in the cloud and utilize that data, bypassing the network issues. And so we have those at the device now. And then think about doing a PowerPoint with ePaper, you know? Now you're back to, because those static images, PowerPoints are mostly just a series of static images. You know, now you can start rethinking a reusable space where the intelligence, like you said, is at the device level. And then we can just get that data directly to the cloud and utilize that within, you know, within your platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff there, as always. My mind went to a ton of different areas. I just last night was with a friend of mine from Intel, and he was talking a lot about converged networks. He worked with with me within the AVNU Alliance, and we were talking about converged networks and how that needs to be happening. So that's one element. Another element is we're working with a music service provider who's looking at the AWS Kuiper satellite initiative to, in that case, get totally off the corporate network, so as to to overcome security and bandwidth constraints. So there's a lot going on in that area. But I think one of the really central things that ties back to sustainability at the really top level is if you make dynamic workspaces, or any spaces, and we talk about workspaces, but any spaces, you can reduce the size of those spaces. So that's the ultimate carbon footprint. Build more efficient buildings that are smaller but more dynamic. That's really huge savings in terms of reducing the size of the built environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that and we've already seen that trend starting to happen with hoteling or hot desking, whatever you want to call it. And so I see that really accelerating. And even Microsoft, with Microsoft Places, is making that a part of their strategy as well. So you're starting to see that really take off. And with that, you're starting to see a lot of these companies with solution for sensors, solution for ways to extrapolate that data for Microsoft Places. You're going to start seeing this really move quickly.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about Microsoft Places, and I know what you're talking about, but my mind went totally somewhere else there, because during the pandemic, Microsoft were pioneering this concept of like these local hubs of Microsoft physical spaces, so that it was something between work from home and work in the big office in Redmond. It was work in some local areas, so you're with some other Microsoft employees, not necessarily in your department, but you've got some sort of social interaction, but you don't have to go all the way to Redmond. And that struck me as a super interesting kind of middle concept, where you're reducing carbon footprint of travel costs, but you're maintaining that social element. I don't know whether they continued with it after the pandemic, but they were using it during the pandemic.
There are some companies that are doing that in Portland. I've seen there's a few WeWorks type of spaces that will have little pods set up for corporations, and some of them will actually put those corporations up on the wall, so you can actually see them, to know you're in the right place if you're coming to visit them. So you'll actually see little pockets of those corporate teams within those spaces, and I think that's a great idea. And I think that it's something that decentralizing a corporate headquarters into, we did that at PAE actually years ago. We actually in the Bay Area had a number of different satellite offices because we wanted to reduce that carbon footprint. And I think it's a great strategy, but and I think something else we need to consider is, as work is becoming part of the home and it's becoming part of, and part of the community like that, rethinking third spaces and rethinking where that can go. Because for health, I think it's important that people have a sense of community in a third space. And it used to be Elks Club, or it used to be, bowling night, and we've gotten away from that. So finding ways that's a whole nother discussion, but
and it's something that I can't say too much about, but I am talking to some people about that right now. There was something I was going to come back to and I completely forgotten about it, but I am going to maybe to begin to wrap this up, talk about something. You mentioned MCP earlier, and and I'm actually going to correct you on that because it stands for Model Context Protocol.
Yeah, model context protocol. Did I say something different?
Yeah, you said Media Context Protocol.
Oh, sorry, meant model. Yeah,
which I can understand in our industry.
Model context protocol. Sorry.
And I was actually thinking about this because, as you know, we've been working with Excite with the OpenAV initiative of sharing APIs up into the cloud, and then with them spinning up a MCP server, being able to use AI input as the front end of those API calls, and I'm thinking about that, thinking that it may basically sign the death warrant for control systems and things because you no longer need them because you've got an AI input at the front end and a highly intelligent one feeding direct API calls at the rear end. And I was actually thinking on my walk this morning about the latency concerns about that and whether that will be a showstopper because a lot of this stuff happens in the cloud, and if you're making API calls from the cloud, whether people will be prepared to put up with a several second latency between them asking for their boardroom to be configured for a video conference and their boardroom actually being configured for a video conference versus going to a Crestron or an AMX touch panel and just pressing a button and it happening. Have you got any thoughts about that? It was just something I heard this morning.
Well, yeah, already there's a lot of thoughts about how much on-prem intelligence that you have and how much of the model is on-prem. And so I think that you're going to start seeing that work itself out because you're right. But we went through this with control systems. I mean, think about how many bad Crestron programmers had just used steppers and then didn't give the proper feedback from button touches. And clients kept pushing and pushing, and then next thing you know, it crashes. I've seen so many bad control system implementations over the years where clients were just waiting too long for a reaction or a confirmation of what they've done. So I personally think that as an industry in AV control systems, there's been some amazing things done with control systems, but I think the bad implementations of control systems and particularly UI, has been a black eye on our industry for many, many years. And I think that, and believe it or not, I've heard so many Crestron programmers that got upset when Teams rooms and Zoom rooms started becoming pervasive. And my reaction was, we just weren't good enough. How could we compete with somebody who actually has a UX team and actually develops the software for a living and can have, and can go through, user groups and can actually quantify how well these UIs are working rather than one programmer that thinks they have really pretty looking user interfaces.
Yeah, I think that's been a bugbear of mine for decades now. And I think my personal opinion, controversial maybe, is that the control system companies kind of brought that upon themselves because they made the gluing stuff together so difficult that the programmers were basically focused around the getting the stuff working, and the actual providing the interface became an afterthought. So the guy who can, get the basic stuff working isn't a UX designer, and he's just like tasked with putting some buttons on a screen at the last minute, and you end up with these, as you say, these just awful.
That's why you don't have the same people doing user interface that you have doing back-end development.
You shouldn't have. Most people do have, but it's a totally
right. But good companies will have graphic designers, UX designers, and with people that have studied that discipline and know how people use interfaces.
But do you think most AV integrators have that, or do they just have their Crestron programmer?
No, most of them still have Crestron programmers, although things have been templated. Better companies have graphic designers or better designers that have templated their their UI skins and have made it so that you have standards that you have to adhere to. Sometimes they're not always adhered to, but it's gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do think that still, I think you're right though. I think the trend is going to be more towards voice interface, more towards intuitive, more intuitive automation and predictive automation. And I think that that's where we're really going to see a lot of strides. So the idea of having touch panels on walls everywhere is going to be pretty foreign, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, just yesterday you sent me an article about, is a single pane of glass dead? And, this concept of people being a lot more comfortable with conversational input than button pushers and things. And we've become used to that in our homes with Alexa and Google Home and all sorts of home automation. And it's yet another example. When I got into our industry, the professional part of the industry led the domestic part of the industry. In the last 15 years, that trend's been reversed. And a lot of the trends that we see in Pro AV have originated in residential AV. And this conversational interface is yet one more of those things. And it really makes me think about whether we're on our game in our part of our industry. We should be leading. We've got the budgets to do these massive jobs. Why the hell are we not leading the resi side of our industry?
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting because I've said for years the absolute best and the absolute worst control system programmers I've seen are in resi, and because they have very complex, very in the high end, we're talking about the billionaires, you start to have very complex systems that are really pushing the envelope on what's possible. But then you also have the trunk slammers and the masses who really haven't spent the time to, going to Crestron or AMX or, going to classes and really honing their craft and are just doing hang and bangs and then programming remotes. Mm-hmm. But I think that Josh AI is an interesting one that I've seen in the resi market that I think could inform what's coming. I saw recently one of a mutual friend of ours who has a residential AV company showed me how he programmed Josh AI, and it was utilizing an LLM. Mm-hmm. He just said, I want you to automate this using this, and this is what I want the result to be. Mm-hmm. And it programmed the control system. I think about how all the time I spent learning AxLink or Simple Plus or all of these proprietary languages for control systems over the years. And then look at him showing me on his phone doing what used to take me hours and hours and hours just through simple language.
Yeah, I was talking to someone just yesterday about Josh AI, and it is interesting what they're doing. It mirrors some of what Excite are doing with OpenAV.
I'm excited. I'm really excited because I think that MCP, Model Context Protocol, thanks for correcting me, is going to be. I think that people are not prepared for how quickly this is going to transform.
I think it's going to be transformational. Interestingly, at home, I still do if this then that, just as a really simple way of. I don't have a Crestron or an AMX. I just have smart sockets and light switches that I can interact, with in the way that I want to interact with them, and it's just beginning now to come into our industry with what we were talking about earlier, which is smart endpoint devices. Being able to be controlled in a much more flexible and I don't know. I mean, one of my other bugbears is the lack of learning in our devices. I mean, my Nest thermostat here learns my behavior. Why does my meeting room not learn my behavior, or my office space not learn my behavior? And I think we're beginning to get towards that now, but we've been really slow at adopting that sort of learning.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that it's just that we've been stuck in our silos in the AV world, and we just have not looked at where things are headed. First, it was with IT and networks, and we didn't see the writing on the wall there. Then the commoditization of UC spaces. So we need to get a lot better at looking. I get trade magazines from industrial IoT and see what's happening with industrial, because if you think about for resilience, factories have to be working all the time and 24/7 in harsh conditions. So a lot of our installations, I look to that for that kind of resilience. And so looking outside of our own little bubble is essential for us to move this industry and our part of this industry forward.
Yeah. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I am conscious that we've been talking for an hour and a quarter now. Is there anything you'd like to say to close us out here?
I'd just like to say that I really enjoy these conversations. You always kind of spark, get me to think of things in a new way. And I think that's essential right now in this exciting time, because AI, some people are looking at it as the death knell, and some people are looking at it as very transformative. And I think it's going to be both, or could be both. But I think that it's an exciting time, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I agree. And I love our conversations, whether they be at a cocktail bar in Portland or on this podcast. But people sometimes say to me, are you scared by AI or are you excited by AI? And I typically say back to them, yes, both of the above.
Exactly.
Probably more excited than scared, but there are things that we're not doing at a legislative level that really scare me, to do with TDM and copyright and data set biases, and there's a whole lot of foundational stuff that we haven't done on a legislative level that really scares me. But the possibilities are super exciting, particularly the possibilities of human AI collaborations. That's as with all technology, that's where the richness of it lies.
I totally agree. And I think that now we just need to make sure that our voices are heard, and that we learn what's coming, understand it, and speak up, because all of our voices are going to help determine the trajectory of what's coming. So,
yeah. Well, thanks so much, Scott. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me at Scott Simpson. I'm with AVI-SPL, the Experience Technology Group, otherwise known as XTG. So reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thanks very much for listening to Surroundscapes. We try to cover hot topics as well as partner spotlights, tech Q&A sessions, and case studies. There's a new episode every Tuesday. You can find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms or at surroundscapes.bluesoundprofessional.com. Thanks again. See you next time.